Hey, it's BAO, and this is Coffee with BAO. This is a series where I chat with people over coffee who are doing cool stuff in business, music, entertainment, pop culture, and more. And specifically, I like to focus on the topics of their creative process, their cultural identity, and their personal growth. And since it's one of our earlier episodes, I'd really love your feedback on what's working and what could use some work. So let's meet our guest today. So I'm here today with a fellow Asian American immigrant, a serial entrepreneur, and a podcaster, and of course, a very creative thinker. He's recently earned his MBA from UC Berkeley Haas School of Business and went straight into building 2 new businesses, all based around storytelling and podcasting, Alumni.fm and Voice FM. Here is my friend, collaborator, and mentor, Sean Lee.
Sean. Hi, pal.
Hey, cheers. Do you have your beverage today?
I got my coffee with BAO.
All right. Thank you for joining me, Sean, from the suburbs. Sean is my former neighbor from downtown LA, and now he's in the burbs of Irvine, California. You've got a lifestyle change recently with your family and your new location. How's it feeling?
I mean, getting used to it, dealing with I shouldn't say dealing with, but having a 10-month-old baby, living in the burbs is pretty nice with a baby, I'll say. As opposed to downtown, we have a lot more space. I get to just bike around without afraid of getting hit by a car, things like that. So it's been great.
That's fantastic. I'm happy for you to get some peace and quiet finally.
Yeah. I do miss the ambulance every day.
Yeah, totally. So, Sean, we are both first generation immigrants from Asia, but you come from a small town in China, or it was a small town. Could you share a little bit about that journey and why you ended up in the Midwest?
Yeah. So we're from this capital city of Guizhou province called Guiyang. Comparatively a small town, a small city in China. I mean, but we still have 4 million people, which is massive. I think it's about half the size of Michigan.
That's nuts.
For one city. But it's part of the southwest region of China, next to Sichuan province, which a lot of people know Sichuan from Sichuan food, right? Spicy food. We have similar dialect and cuisine, which bundles us in kind of in that cultural identity. And back in 92, my family as a whole, we moved here because my dad was invited here to do his PhD, first his master's and his PhD in reading and language arts. So my parents are teachers. They are professors that teach teachers how to teach. And very specifically
tongue twister.
Around language. Yeah, it is. It's a mouthful. But that's how we ended up in Michigan.
How was growing up, on the outskirts of, not outskirts, but like not in a big city in Michigan as an immigrant?
You're not wrong. It is the outskirts of Detroit or the greater suburbs of Detroit. It's funny because when people ask, where you're from, the simplest answer would be Detroit. But, we're 25 miles from Detroit. We're not from Detroit. Nothing wrong about Detroit, but it's actually when we say we're from Detroit, true Detroiters actually think we're robbing their identity. That's the only reason we're saying that. So growing up was really amazing experience for me as an immigrant, I would say. I know a lot of that is attributed to just the fact that we moved to a relatively affluent, upper middle class neighborhood and just county, actually, as a whole. Oakland County at one point, I think in the 90s, was the 3rd richest county in the US. And part of that is driven by the fact that all the white collar workers from the automotive industry, GM, Ford, Chrysler, they live in Oakland County where we lived. Because of the relative affluence and high levels of education in the community, there's at least no discrimination or racism that I experienced growing up.
Did people tell you to go back to China at any point? I assume no.
No, nobody told me to go back to China.
That's really funny because I'm from Vietnam and not China, but I've had so many people tell me to go back to China. Your hometown now, you said it's no longer a small town or a small city. It's like gigantic. Do you ever miss like how it was?
That's a great question because I left at the age of 7, and I think I've been away from my hometown for so long now that around age 16, I remember very distinctly, I had pretty much lived in China for 7, 8 years, right? I lived in the US for 7, 8 years, right? For half and half of my life.
Yeah.
And I think at that point, I started wondering, what is my cultural and my, just my overall identity? Am I Chinese? Am I American? Especially around high school. This is kind of when you're in high school, a lot of the different schools start coming together because of sports, right?
Right.
More actively. And so you're engaging with other school districts. And it was around that time that I think I finally kind of left my bubble of white suburbia and came in contact with neighboring cities that had a higher percentage of Asians. And it was the first time where I kind of discovered my Asian identity of sorts
Wow, that's so
and found
interesting.
my, not that I didn't belong, right? But it was just now I was surrounded by all these Asians. And I started exploring that a little bit more.
You got your naturalization fairly recently, like a couple years ago, and
Yeah.
now you're like officially an American. But like,
Yeah.
how do you
26 years later.
how do you, as a 30-something person, think about your identity now?
Part of the reason, I never switched my citizenship, which is a rarity, right, for an immigrant to come here. And I held back for 21 years. I think one of the big turning points was obviously the 2016 elections, which I couldn't vote in until I became a citizen in 2018. So this year was my first election.
Dude,
Hooray.
congratulations and thank you.
Yeah. And definitely when I naturalized in 2018, I was like, I'm American more than anything.
That's so interesting. That's really cool.
I remember also seeing this Ronald Reagan clip, and it really stuck with me. He said that, America's the only country you can go to, live there, right? Assimilate, and then call yourself an American. I can't go to Vietnam, live there for 20 years and be like, I'm Vietnamese, even though I might be fluent in the language, right? But I would never call myself Vietnamese.
That's
right?
fascinating.
But because American's such a amorphous identity, right? American. It's the only country in the world where you can do that.
Yeah. Wow. I never thought of it like that. That's really interesting.
Right.
Totally. So outskirts of Michigan, then you went to college also in Michigan. And this is where you kind of met up with some friends and started your first business, which was an e-commerce business eventually, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Can you tell us about just that whole like adventure and what compelled you guys to go do that?
I mean, I think entrepreneurship has always been a part of me, at least wanting to solve problems. That's what entrepreneurship
sure.
is to me, is problem solving. It's not about, building a business, making a buttload of money and living on a beach. Even when I think of success, it's not about how much money we make. It's about how many people's problems are we solving. The more people's problems we're solving, the better. And so back to your question, after college, it was a terrible time to graduate with a finance degree. I went to Michigan State and studied finance and accounting and graduated in 2007. People tend to forget that before the subprime mortgage crisis, the auto industry actually was going bankrupt, right? And so back in 2007, we had grammar schools, elementary and middle schools just shutting down left and right because families were just leaving and they didn't have enough students. So they shut down schools, right? Wow. That's crazy. And so it was a terrible time to be in finance. But at the same time, because I always had a passion for starting businesses, it was what a great time to just go figure something out. And that's really, I think, something that was this serendipitous moment that allowed that to happen. Had the economy been great, right? Had I been able to get a very great finance job, might not have happened. My life story may not have happened this way. And I'm telling you all this because I just graduated my MBA into this downturn. So I feel like I'm like the harbinger of downturns. Just whenever Sean goes to school and graduates, there's going to be a downturn. But again, I see it as a huge opportunity, right? I see this is the next wave of Airbnbs, Ubers,
yeah, dude.
Lyfts,
so you linked up with Phil, who's a brilliant guy and really nice as well. And you guys just found a problem to solve. And I think that's a really cool story that you should tell.
I think when we start as entrepreneurs, sometimes it's difficult to find your niche, right? Either for us in e-commerce, you're trying to find a product niche. Now I'm doing podcasting. I'm trying to find a service niche, right? We ended up looking for pricing niches. It was about finding products that had high margin. This is the first business. We sold automotive accessories that had high margins, that were high quality, and basically were sitting at a price range where nobody was sitting at. So our competitors were selling products at $40, for example, just on the super cheap end, making $5 margins. And then we had competitors sitting at the $300 side, right? Just the OEM stuff, original equipment manufacturer. So nobody was selling anything between $100 to $200. And so that's what I call a pricing niche. And that's something we thought, why don't we provide as good of a quality as the $400 product, charge people less, but because we're charging a lot more than the $40 guys, we can provide additional services such as, hassle-free returns. Just really put the customer first, right? Be customer centric. And when you're customer obsessed, you not only can build a great company, in my opinion, but you start understanding that for that to happen, you have to price it in.
I want to summarize for the audience what your initial business was with Phil. And that's Xenon Supply Company, an online store where people basically can buy automotive accessories such as headlights. But your advantage, I guess, was milking the YouTube content. And I thought that was like a really interesting story, how you guys saw that need and filled it.
I mean, this was actually the doing of Phil and Anthony, two of my really close friends to this day. And they just went out and talked to customers. They went to car meets, morning coffee or coffee in cars, and just asked people, would you buy this product and why? Why wouldn't you, right? But really understanding the customer's needs. And one of the biggest gaps was the fact that it's not that people didn't want the products, that they didn't feel comfortable installing it themselves. I mean, the process for installing an accessory in a car, let's say a radio, let's say a headlight, is practically the same in every single car. But because your car is such an expensive investment, people are apprehensive about messing with it. And so what we realize is if we just shoot their car, showing them how to do something on their car, then it clicks for them. And so what we end up doing is going out and just shooting how-to DIY videos, do-it-yourself videos on any car that we can get our hands on. Because everything we're doing was reversible. So we would even go as far as when we couldn't get our hands on a popular car, just go rent it, install something, and then just revert it.
That's so
and then return the car. But you did something similar, right? And it's not like we knew each other when you started Juicy Kids, but I think it's just the fact that you and I were so people focused.
How much of your website traffic was coming from these videos?
Almost all of it, 90%.
Man, that's crazy.
The other 10% was made up of B2B, dealerships, auto shops.
That's so cool. So you guys did that business for quite a while, and eventually you ended up having an amicable split in order to, I guess, for you guys to move on and grow, but also just to save your relationship, because being in business with your best friend is pretty hard.
Well, especially at the age of 24.
Yeah, but I mean, what was like the biggest learning from making that decision to split?
Well, for one, we realized that the partnership wasn't exactly constructive, and our relationship was deteriorating. And we're not just best friends, we're family. And so it's like, what really matters? We can always start another business. There are always other things we can work on together. But because we can't figure this stuff out at that point in time, and we frankly, looking back, we didn't have the right resources or advisors or mentors to help us through it, we figured, it's probably just easier to buy each other out. So we actually started two businesses. One was called Xenon Supply, as you mentioned. The other was Precision LED. So we kind of sold each other the respective businesses. And that way, it was like we still have businesses to run, right? But we're not tied at the hip. But the funniest thing was because the businesses were similar, we still advised each other. It was like we were each
Yeah,
other's board advisors, but we didn't have to butt heads about anything.
that's really great. So after you guys, moved past the e-commerce businesses, you ventured into a couple of other businesses, including Crave Lab, which is a co-working space in downtown LA. And can you talk about like what was just the main purpose? Because I know we've had a conversation about it before that it wasn't just like to make money.
It was definitely not to make money. I worked at the math, and it's one of those things where we had e-commerce business that was bringing in $50,000 a month, right? And here's a co-working space that potentially bring in some money, but it was going to be very difficult because realized that unlike a restaurant, the square footage of a desk, right, once you rent it out, it's kind of locked. It's not like you can have turnover on that desk space. Sure, you may have some hot desks, right, where people can come and go, but still it's very hard to manage this membership model. That's why airplanes oversubscribe their seats. That's why gyms oversubscribe their memberships, just because they know half the people may not come. And it's
Right.
just this huge churn that you have to deal with. And so I knew that, that was an uphill battle, and two, very difficult to really make a scalable business that's going to bring in a lot of profits or a lot of impact. What I did think was going to bring an impact for myself and the community was the fact that, we created a space where the community can get together and meet. And that's actually part of the reason how we met, right? I met Brad through Crave Lab. He was looking at a space, a desk there, and then he introduced me to you. And to this day, because of Crave Lab, I've met just so many amazing people in my network.
Okay, Sean. So meeting me was way better than making a buttload of money.
100%. Well, it's so I there's another selfish reason as to why I opened up Crave Lab. At that point, I've been an entrepreneur for about 2 years. And I just thought my network is just getting smaller and smaller. Unlike working, this is the downside of being an entrepreneur that many people don't talk about. When you work for a big corporation, there's a lot of turnover with people, your teams, or just even movement, right? You might move between teams on projects and have colleagues and peers. As an entrepreneur, you really don't. You might join a meetup, but there's nothing that's sustainable every day that you can interact with people meaningfully.
Yeah, totally.
And so that was the other reason I wanted to open it was, let's build a community and not only support entrepreneurs, but provide a space for me to network with other people.
Yeah, that's really great. You recently completed your MBA at UC Berkeley's Haas School of Business, and I see you're repping the sweatshirt today. That's awesome. I got my fake MBA here mug from Anderson School of Management. Congratulations, by the way, on that.
Thank you.
This year, graduation. And just right away, you're going into 2 new businesses based on storytelling. Can you tell us about alumni.fm and voice.fm?
Yeah. When I was applying to business school, I was looking for a podcast to listen to, but Haas just never had a podcast. And so when I got to school and I was meeting all these amazing people and students, I thought, this is terribly inefficient that I'm having to do these one-on-one intros. I thought, why not just capture their story in a podcast and share that? And so that's kind of what I set out to do. And because I had some experience with the DIY how-to videos on YouTube, I know how to edit video. I figured how hard could it be to edit audio as a one-man team. And I did that for 2 years, just as a side passion project, because while I was in the MBA, I made a hard pivot into investment banking. I thought, I've always bootstrapped my businesses. If I want to raise money someday, one of the biggest barriers to getting investors that I hear in the entrepreneurial community is that, you have these brilliant creators and makers, right? And startup people, but they don't know anything about investments, about financials, how to talk to investors, how to speak their language, right? And so after I was done with that, and I was very intentional about why I want to do it and what I want to get out of it, which was financial modeling and just understanding valuations. I realized, my heart and soul is obviously still in entrepreneurship. And the problem was I didn't know what to do. I just had this rewiring in my brain for investment banking, right? I just didn't have a clue, but I knew I wanted to start something. And the last thing on my mind was, hey, I'm gonna go start a podcasting business because it just sounded ridiculous. And even when I thought about it, I thought, what's the business potential? Here I am. If I build a podcast business, probably going to be a service business. We're going to provide podcast production services. It's exciting. I shouldn't downplay it, but it just wasn't exciting enough for me.
So people listening don't know what it is yet. Can you pitch us what alumni.fm is?
Yeah. So alumni.fm is basically what I ended up doing for Berkeley Haas, which is building an alumni podcast. And I've built a turnkey, system around podcast production for other universities. So basically going around and helping universities start their alumni podcast so that we can help connect alumni through stories.
Yeah, that's a good pitch, dude. So that's really great.
9 months.
And
I
then
hope I figure out the pitch by now.
Totally. And then you've got a concurrent business, which is really amazing and has to deal with more technology related stuff.
Yeah. Let me actually wrap up the previous thought because I'll link that to this.
Yeah, totally.
Because I ended off saying that I didn't want to build a service business, and here I am building a service business, right? But the real thing I'm after is building a content business. All this production I'm doing for other universities, I want to build this content network, kind of like an ESPN of alumni stories. I think that's the best way to frame it. Because I was looking at the alumni space, right? We go to all these amazing universities, Art Center, me, Michigan State and Berkeley, and we have all this alumni network. How do you access it? How do you discover it? How do you engage it?
Annoying ass postcards for me postcards, at least.
Magazines, newsletters. The most exciting things are like the in-person events that they might host once or twice a year, right? But what's the scale? That's not scalable, right? And so, is it always going to be LinkedIn? Are we always going to be looking at paper resumes, right? In 2030? Maybe. I hope not. And it just made me wonder, like, there's got to be a richer way to discover and engage your alumni network. And this might be that potential. And so if we're able to build up this library, expansive library of content, then now I'm not building just a service business. I'm not just a production studio. I can become 21st Century Fox, right? I can be the content library owner. I can become Marvel, right? And I think that's really what inspired me to look at this business differently than just a service business, which is potentially a $5-10 million business. If you have a content business, Gimlet Media, we're talking about, The Ringer, Joe Rogan, right? These are content businesses, brands that are potentially worth hundreds of millions now. So that got me more excited. Going into the second project, the problem with the podcasting space is that it's very difficult to discover and access content with existing podcatchers, as they call it, the Apple Podcast Player, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, whatever. Just the way to think about how podcast consumption should be done is very outdated because they're basing podcast consumption on radio, which is that radio content is ephemeral content. You listen to it tomorrow, you're not going to listen to it next month, right?
Yeah. And listening is very passive.
And it's very passive, correct. You can only listen. They're still telling you to type in URLs and and Google search stuff. There's nothing you can click on. You can't interact with the audio. So those are the two main pain points that we're solving with Voice.fm, Voice with a Y, VOYCE, in that we want to, make content much more accessible. So now you go to, say, the One Haas show, right? It's all alumni stories, but you can filter based on industry or interest, let's say entrepreneurship and women, right? So you can have both tags on and listen to all the stories, all the episodes that are related to female entrepreneurs, right? Versus right now, you're just being forced to listen to what's most recent. Right. It's like you have to literally dig through every episode to find stuff. It's dumb. And the second thing is the access to the content within the episodes, which will also help with discovery and recommendation. But what we're capturing there is, what are the interesting items? Let's say it's a book, let's say it's a tool, let's say it's a person or a link that's mentioned in the episode. Why can't we just click through on it? Why do I have to hit rewind, listen to it again, open up my browser, type it in? That's like 3 steps when you could just click one. And so that will hopefully not only make the user experience much better, but it will provide an additional layer of monetization for podcast creators like you and I, which in my one of my goals is to democratize podcasting, right? Because right now it's just dominated by Joe Rogan, right? It's a winner takes all. If you're not Joe Rogan, you don't make any money. and to me, that's what YouTube was able to do, was help democratize that platform for creators. It's not just NBC, ABC, Fox, right? You and I can create a channel, amass 100,000 users, and make a decent income off of this. And that's what democratization does. And so that's really what we're after with creating a better podcast platform. So it's a better listener experience and a better creator experience.
So what's the end form that Voice.fm takes?
I mean, it's right now our first iteration is an app. The first few iterations will be an app. Will that be the final iteration? I don't know, because really our core value proposition is a layer of data that we're capturing, not just the metadata, but the metadata, right, in the episodes, and then the categorization and organization of shows on an episodic level, not just on a show level. Because right now, categorization is just Tim Ferriss, business or entrepreneurship podcast. That's an entire category for that entire show of 400 episodes. Yeah. And Joe Rogan's just talk show, whatever it is, social, society, entire category for some hundreds of episodes. But if we can tag on the episodic level, now you can actually do recommendation cross episodes, and that's something that's much needed.
So let me translate that into Coffee with BAO. Coffee with BAO currently is under culture and society, and that's the only way you can sort or find it. However, with Voice.fm, people are going to be able to go into each episode and see whether it's about a Supreme Court case or visual art or music or entrepreneurship. And then you're going to also have like that data layer where if you recommend a book during our conversation now, people will actually be able to click over to like go check out that book. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Or I mentioned Voice.fm and you can click through on it.
That's right. Totally. I can't wait to get my hands on this, by the way.
Yeah. Me neither. That's why I'm sharing this very openly as an entrepreneur, as a founder, because at the end of the day, like I just want this to be in the hands of people. That's my passion, is I want this problem solved. If one of the listeners want to steal the idea in the proverbial term, I don't consider it stealing, because an idea is just an idea.
Yeah, if they can execute it, good on them, right?
Yeah, they can execute it better than me and faster than me. You know what? Godspeed. I just want to be able to use it. And
yeah,
I think that I share this because I see many entrepreneurs having this mentality that they hoard their ideas, right? Like it's the last great idea they'll ever have in their life, which is inaccurate. Because if you're, as I was saying, entrepreneurs are problem solvers. There will always be problems in the world. The moment you create a solution for a problem, it creates a new problem. So it's an endless cycle of just problems in the world that you'll have the opportunity to solve.
That's really great position to take on all that, Sean. I totally respect that, and I totally agree. Like, there's no point in hoarding your ideas. So we've been talking about like working with partners and teams and stuff, and now you're obviously trying to scale this thing and bring in a bigger team and work in a more effective way after all of the stuff you've learned at business school. And I'm wondering if your perception of like building a team has shifted in the last few years.
Yeah. It's definitely shifted. Prior to the MBA, I just don't think I was equipped with the right mindset, tools, advisors, language to work with people and really collaborate on a partner level, right? And the trouble that I've encountered before was that I tended to avoid difficult conversations because I'm just a you know me, I'm just a happy go lucky guy. Like, I will always find the silver lining in a problem. Like, literally, we could get nuked tomorrow and be like, you know what? Time for a fresh start.
That's why I love
Like,
you, Sean.
but when it comes to partnerships, it's good to be positive and forward thinking, but you also need to deal with your problems when they come up. And so what I realized, going through the MBA, which helped me a lot, was being in an environment that put me around peers, right? Peers that are definitely way smarter than me, way more experienced, in the respective fields, and just learning how to work with people and being more patient. I think that's ultimately was my Achilles heel, was that although I'm very patient with people in general, I'm not very patient with myself. That's something I learned, but I'm also definitely not patient with problems and problem solving. But when the problem was with a person and I can't immediately solve it, or with anything, I'm just like, you know what? Let's just brush this aside. So that's where in an MBA environment, you can't just brush it aside. You have an assignment, you have a project, it's due, you got to get it done. You got to work with the people, right? I really had to learn new vernacular to just be able to engage with people that way. And that's the biggest shift. And so now, whenever there's a conflict that arises, I have learned to take the time, let's say before a difficult conversation, take half an hour before the conversation, just write things out, write out my feelings, write out my thoughts, so that I can be very factual in that engagement. Because at the end of the day, I don't want to, it's not about me being right or wrong. It's about, how do we move forward?
Communicating. Yeah.
Yeah, about communicating clearly and effectively. Actually, that's exactly what it is. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, dude.
So that's something that I've been learning and so I'm working on actively.
That's great. If magically there's someone listening to this or watching this right now that is the missing piece to whatever puzzle you're working on, like who would that person be?
Definitely always short of technical people. Technical people and talented designers and UX people like yourself. But above all, just people who are really passionate about what I'm passionate about. Like, if you're passionate about stories and telling stories and helping people or organizations tell stories, or building businesses that have impact, that's really the common language I speak.
That's awesome, dude. So Sean's projects are fairly new and there's nothing visual for me to show like I usually do. But if you are a current or a past student at UC Berkeley Haas School of Business and you've heard the podcast, that's Sean and his team. Sean, where can people find you?
Yeah, I think the best place is there's a vanity URL that BAO inspired me to buy, seanlee.me. Just SEANLI.me. And that'll bring you to my LinkedIn. You can connect with me there and message me.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I've always been really impressed with the way that you prioritize and balance your life with everything going on between school and business and family. And especially now that you've got a new child, and you've moved to the burbs and stuff.
Yeah.
Has that always been something that's been a strong suit for you? Or is that something you actively work to attain?
I definitely think that's something I have to work hard at every day. Just growing up, I don't consider myself very disciplined, but everything I say, take that with a grain of salt, because I realize that I have a very narrow vision and comparison of myself to other people, and I think that's actually just driven by my mother. she holds me to a very high standard. She was not a tiger mom. I was an A and B student throughout high school and college, and yeah, they were disappointed that I didn't go to Stanford or Harvard, but it wasn't the end of the world either.
Right.
And what I find really interesting, though, is when I say they hold me to a high standard, is they hold me to a high standard to myself about doing stuff that matters to me, doing stuff that makes me excited about my day. I don't want to say makes me happy. I think it makes me just feel alive. Right?
Yeah.
Being true to yourself, and that's something I think that has ultimately carried it over into how I look at prioritization. I don't, claim to be the most effective, efficient business CEO or leader in the world. I don't wake up at 4 a.m., swim for 2 hours and, eat my oatmeal and then just bang out the next 18 hours, right? I don't do that. I'm very much a creative like you. I have my highs and lows. I ebb and flow. Being like I go through these definitely go through these ups and downs on a hourly, daily basis. But I've slowly started to recognize them. And I took a class at Haas called Becoming Superhuman, the science of peak performance and productivity. And what it taught me was that you learn to love yourself and embrace these ups and downs. You don't fight it. You don't say, "Oh, it's messed up that I'm so emotional that I have these ups and downs." Everybody has ups and downs, right? But you ride the wave. You learn to ride the wave. When you're at a peak emotional, state, get shit done. Get the most important stuff that you need to get done. And then when you're just drained, you're just like, you don't feel like doing anything. Don't do anything. Just relax.
Yeah.
Go down rabbit holes, right? And it's giving yourself that grace. Whereas before I used to fight it.
Yeah. I think there's like a weird type of pressure that society has put on all of us to be constantly productive.
You got to be producing every hour on the hour, right? This is not the industrial age, right? I'm not putting a door on a car. Like there's no quota of doors I got to put on this car.
Yeah. And I think what it is that people don't put value on improving your personal state. And that is, it's the same way that people don't put value on like parents who don't have a job, taking care of the children or like making meals and stuff. That is a lot of work, right? And so is making yourself feel like a decent human being. Like
it is.
That's the same amount of productivity, I think.
And I think one of the key things that I took away from that class was that productivity is about intentionality. Those two things go hand in hand. What does it mean to be productive? Does it mean you get a ton of bullshit work done? Is that being productive? Right? Absolutely not. That's not productivity. Tim Ferriss says, being busy without being intentional about what you're doing is the most destructive form of laziness. So being busy is being lazy. Being intentional is being productive. And so I can have ADHD, as I call it, right? I can go down rabbit holes, but just be intentional about it, because how else am I supposed to learn new things and explore, right? That's part of our creative process, is just to go down rabbit holes. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what I needed to be doing at this time and accepting that. And I feel productive about it.
Wow.
Versus rejecting myself. And so that's one thing. And then the other thing is obviously being intentional about when you do have your peaks and when you're on, just be on and focus and don't respond to emails. Don't go down rabbit holes. Do the stuff that you haven't been wanting to do all day. Just, when you're on, get the shit that you want to get done. It's called eating your frog.
That's amazing, Sean. That's, super on point and extremely relevant for me too. Cause like I'll have moments and like you say, just ride it, right? Or milk it for what it's worth when it's there.
There's one more thing that I've actually been practicing and helps me a lot with, again, all of this is just personal acceptance and learning to love yourself for who you are and what you do. And to what I just said about eating your frog, just pick one thing that you want to get done the next day. Just pick one thing and accept yourself if you just finish that one thing. I know that sounds crazy because I have like 16 projects going on and I have like 20 tasks. But if you can just get one important thing done a day for 365 days, let's say 350 some days minus the weekends, you're going to make huge strides. And that's one thing that I've been living with this quote for a while. I live with a lot of quotes, by the way, a lot of proverbs. It takes me like years to internalize it. One is that there's a Confucius saying, right? It's not about how slow you go. It's as long as you don't stop. And then the other thing is from Bill Gates. But Bill Gates said, people tend to overestimate what they can accomplish in a year and underestimate what they can accomplish in 10 years. And I think Tony Robbins adapted to, or at least I adapted it to, people tend to overestimate what they can accomplish in one day, but severely underestimate what they can accomplish in a year. And so I just find myself being much more happy, feeling much more productive by just doing the one important thing a day. I might have 6 important things, but if I tell myself just get that one thing done and I even don't do the other 5, it's okay. It's okay. It's not the end of the world.
Thank you for that. Now if I keep that in mind, I won't beat my own ass all the time about not accomplishing the 5 things.
But if you get the other stuff done, that's just gravy, right? But
Yeah.
at no point in time should you try to expect yourself to finish 5 things today.
So what's one thing you want to level up on in the near future, personal or professional?
There's so many things that I am constantly learning to improve on a weekly basis. Like every week, it's just something new. Last week, it was learning how to swim better. This week, it was learning how to hold my breath better, how to have better breathing technique. These are the personal things. And from the business side, it definitely is how can I prioritize better? So what I was talking about before was getting your priority done. And priority, they said, should be a singular word. It should not be a plural word. Because you can't have multiple priorities.
Yeah.
It should be a singular word. But prioritizing your priorities, that's a different challenge I didn't anticipate, right? And so that's something that I actually just started figuring out the past couple of weeks by talking again to advisors and mentors and friends like you to help me realize, hey, what you need to align your priorities to, at least your laundry list, is to your North Star. And if you don't know what your North Star is, you need to figure that out first. So for example, my most recent North Star for my next 90 days, and by the way, we do this in 90-day sprints, right? My 90-day North Star until the end of January is fully validate the 2 ideas that I'm working on, the alumni.fm and the voice.fm. Okay, now what are the tasks that are required to make that happen? Do I need to build a website? Probably not. I want to build a website, but I don't need that to validate the idea. Do I need to go talk to customers? 100%. And so now it's cleared all this fog of like all this bullshit stuff that I feel like I need to be doing. I need to be doing financials. I need to be making pitch decks. I need to be, right? There's a million things I can be doing for this business, but only do those things if I'm if I'm first validating the idea. That's the priority. And so now I have crystal clear direction, which I've never understood how leaders had before. Now I understand.
That's amazing, man. This time flew by. I cannot believe I can't believe we're supposed to end this conversation right now because it feels like 10 minutes.
Yeah, it does.
Sean, thank you so much for making time for this conversation. I'm sure a lot of people will appreciate your insights and your knowledge. Can you reiterate where people can find you after this?
Yeah, absolutely. And you can include a link, in the YouTube video or the episode, but it's just at Sean Lee, SEANLI.me, M-E.
SeanLee.me, what's up? It's catchy. Sean's projects are called alumni.fm and voice.fm. Voice is spelled VOYCE.fm.
Yeah.
Sean, can you stay on the line while I give a little outro and I'll come back and say a proper goodbye to you?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Thanks everyone
for
listening.
Awesome. Hey everyone, thank you so much for hanging out with us for Coffee with BAO. But I really appreciate you guys if you can leave me some feedback on this episode, just how to improve on this show, because I'm just putting stuff out there and I don't know if it's working or not. So we'll see you next time. If you want to support the show, you can hit me up, buy me a coffee at coffeewithbao.com. And we'll see you next time. Thank you from me and Sean Lee.